A dry wind swept across the Chaco plateau, like the shadow of an old spirit. He knew everything that was hidden under the layered rocks and in the cracks of the rust-red earth. That day, he brought with him the smell of dust, burnt sage, and something else. Something that was disturbing. The young warrior named Tsenai turned, froze, and narrowed his eyes. A silhouette appeared on the horizon, above a rock ledge. He knew that his brother had gone after the buffalo before dawn, and he knew that it had not returned. Now my heart was clenching like a skin in the sun, and the wind was whispering bad things. Tsenai was not the oldest of the family, but from his youth he was known as the one who hears pollen. He noticed things that others missed. It was the morning of the fourth day of solar standing, when there should have been a blessing in the air. But now there was no chanting, no tinkling tambourine, just the lonely cry of a coyote and a weight on his shoulders, as if someone unseen had placed a stone there. He stepped out of the shadow of the cliff and followed the path that his brother Unanai had taken before dawn. Creosote branches scraped against my legs, and the sound of grasshoppers made my chest tremble. He found footprints, fresh, trampled, bison hoof prints and sandal feet. Everything went smoothly, until one place where the tracks split up, diverged, and then stopped. Beyond that, there were only bloodstains on the shingle and a broken arrow. Not Navajo. He picked it up. The shaft was not made of juniper, like their people, but of hazel. The tip is made of steel, and the feathers are painted blue. These were used by white settlers, more often by hunters, sometimes by mercenaries. Tsenai's blood, Tsenai thickened like heated clay. He knew that his brother couldn't just disappear. This wasn't an animal attack. It was an ambush. He returned to the village in silence. Elder Yata, with a face like a dried apple, listened in silence, peering at the objects around the fire. The bloodstone. Arrow. My brother's broken amulet. In the shadow of the tent, a boy, Wananai's nephew, howled. The women began to sing a mournful tune, not loudly, as if they still hoped for a miracle, but knew the truth. Yathak spoke after a long silence. He said that ever since the whites came, the spirits of the earth have been troubled. Too often men disappear. Too many new trails have been trampled down on the sacred hills, and it was too easy to hear gunshots where only maracas had rang before. Tsenai didn't answer. He simply went out, strapped the straps over his shoulders, put on his matted cloak, and picked up his spear. He was walking toward the canyon, where the white caravans and temporary camps were hidden. He knew that if his brother hadn't returned, someone must have seen him, or the one who saw it is silent. In the depths of the kin-leaking canyon, he found traces of a parking lot, an extinct campfire, stakes driven into the ground, iron pork cans. But there wasn't a soul around. He crouched down and touched the ground. Everything indicated that the parking lot had been abandoned quickly. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were in a hurry. To the side, he found a piece of cloth with bloodstains on it, and a pendant. Christian, simple, wooden, roughly carved, but with effort on it, the letter M. Later, on the way back, he met an old man riding an exhausted mule. The old man was Mexican in appearance, with burnt skin and dark eyes filled with doubt. He didn't want to talk at first, but Tsenai showed him the amulet. The old man nodded. He said that a few days ago he had seen 3 white men taking someone away in a tarpaulin-covered cart by a stream to the north. He didn't know if he was still alive, but he could hear loud arguments. One of the men, a burly man with a beard and a blue hat, shouted that the Indians don't deserve a trial. Tsenai knew that his brother was either dead or captured. And in both cases, justice is not something that comes by itself. With that, he returned to the tribe. The women asked him to wait, and the council of elders talked about spirits, but he didn't listen. He knew that if he didn't go now, the truth would disappear like water in the sand. The next day, he went north again. Beyond the pass, he met a caravan, 6 wagons, guarded by 6 men with rifles. He recognized one of them, a bearded man with a blue hat. The man was laughing as he showed something to the others. Tsenai knew that attacking alone was certain death. He was lying low, waited, and then, as the sun was sinking and the wind was howling again, he saw her. Young woman, not from the tribe. White, but in hand-sewn clothes, not according to urban patterns. Her movements were smooth, and her voice sounded like a river after rain. She was treating one of the men, applying bandages, whispering words he didn't understand, but her eyes were full of compassion, not fear and not contempt. Something in him flinched. He didn't know why he had been watching for so long. Perhaps for the first time he saw that the world of whites is not one color, that there are shades there. She looked up and saw him. Their eyes met. She didn't scream. She just looked surprised, frowned a little, but didn't turn away, as if she knew he wasn't the enemy, or she wanted him not to be an enemy. Tsenai disappeared, but it wasn't just the pain of loss that throbbed in my head. Now there was a new one, a question. Who is she? Why near the murderers? And could her presence mean anything else? He spent the night in the open air, thinking. And when the sky turned gray, he knew he had to go back. Not just revenge. Discover. Understand. But my heart was restless. The wind called, like the spirits in a shaman's song. He couldn't ignore that voice. As the darkness faded, he stared at the pendant he'd found in the parking lot. The letter M seemed to breathe, and somewhere far away, in the morning wind, there seemed to be a soft chant. It wasn't coming from the south. It wasn't coming from the north. It was inside. The day after meeting the mysterious girl, Tsenai's thoughts, Tsenai became like scorched earth, with no previous decisions growing on it. Everything that had seemed clear now throbbed with incomprehension. He knew how to take revenge. He was ready for war, but not for doubt. Doubt has become like a shadow always there. He had to go back to the village, but his legs wouldn't work. He stayed on the hill where he could keep an eye on the white camp. The wagons were moving toward the village of Fort Gallup, which lay at the crossroads between the railroad line and the watershed. The village was newly built, rough wooden buildings, commercial shops, a military camp surrounded by a palisade, and a church with a narrow bell tower. That's where the hunters and the girl were heading. It went parallel, from a distance, hiding among the rocks. On the way, Tsenai came across the place where the shepherds had dumped the body of a dead coyote. An arrow with the same blue plumage protruded from its side. He pulled it out. The blood was fresh. They even shot at an empty threat. For fun. It wasn't hunting. It was entertainment. These were people who had guns as an extension of boredom. Late in the afternoon, he reached the border of Fort Gallup. I couldn't see any buildings because of the woods, but I could hear dogs barking and metal clanging. He left the weapon by the stream and covered it with rocks. In the night, he could not enter the city without being seen. It was an hour when every silhouette aroused suspicion, so he waited until dawn. At first light, he threw on an old cloak and went downstairs like a merchant or a shepherd. People in the city ignored him. There were Mexicans, Navajos, even Cherokees and Mandans. Their faces were dusty, sunburned, and they couldn't tell the colors. The bazaar was bustling with trade. Meat, flour, salt, skins. He walked slowly, peering, trying to catch something familiar. And soon I saw a cart. That's the one. He recognized the winding on the wheel, the belt with the brass buckle. The same man in the blue hat who had shouted outside the camp was standing in the carriage shop. He argued with the blacksmith, demanding to fix the cart, but the blacksmith refused without payment in advance. Tsenai was hiding behind an awning, was listening. "I told you we're going further west. There's no point in staying here," the bearded man said, gesturing. "Your patron must pay," the blacksmith replied. "This isn't an army. I have a family." A girl came up behind him. Now she's wearing a different dress. Plain, gray, but neatly hemmed. She was carrying a basket of herbs. On the face, traces of fatigue. But his gaze was calm, focused. She walked up to the man and said softly, "I don't know." The patient in the cart is delirious again. He needs shade, not heat. The man waved her off, but her words made him glance in the direction of the cart. Tsenai froze. So there must be someone in the cart, someone who's sick or injured. And he didn't rule out that it might be his brother. But how to approach it? He watched until evening. The girl came out later and went to the church. He followed her. Behind the church building is an old front garden where she used to pick herbs. There were no guards or people there. He stepped out of the shadows. She shuddered. She didn't scream. "I just looked carefully." "You're the one who watched?" she said softly. He nodded. "Why are you here?" he asked. "I'm flying," she said after a pause. "That's all I can do. I'm not part of what men do." "Did you see what they did to the one who was with them?" She froze. Then she pursed her lips. "I don't ask questions. But yes, there is a man in the cart. He doesn't say anything. He's in a fever. Is he Navajo?" "I don't know." "My face is covered. He's delirious, with wounds all over his body. I wanted to stay, but they won't let me be around for long. They'll leave tomorrow. I need to see him. If you go in, they'll kill you. Then I'll wait until nightfall." She lowered her gaze. Then she took a small piece of matting out of her bag and shoved it at him. "Tomorrow at sunset by the hay shed. If you're there, and if I can, I'll take him out. Just be alone." He took the cloth. It was warm and smelled of sage. He spent the night in an abandoned chapel outside the city limits. Rumors of vagabonds and runaway Indians swirled among the locals, and he heard someone say that one was seen at the bazaar, I think. I had to be careful. People here weren't looking for justice, just simple answers, and most often with a gun. The next morning, Tsenai watched the cart from afar. The bearded man and his companions were getting ready to go. They bought a new belt, replenished the supply of ammunition. They all had guns. The girl tried to keep up. She didn't talk much. The whole day passed in anticipation. When sunset came, he went to the barn. It smelled of hay, horses, and fat. The girl was already waiting. She motioned for silence and signaled for them to follow. They approached the carriage that the guards had just left. She lifted the curtain. There, under the blanket, lay a man. Face covered in bandages. His chest is covered with burn marks. My hands are covered in dried blood. He was breathing heavily. Tsenai bowed. I looked closely. My heart began to pound. A scar above the eyebrow, amulet on the chest. It was Unanai. He didn't say a word. He just pressed his hand to his brother's chest. Alive. Barely, but alive. He looked at the girl. Her eyes were filled with concern, but she nodded. A distant voice called out as the guard returned to the cart. They froze. Time has stopped. They stood in tense silence until the voices outside the wagon had receded. Tsenai was breathing hard, not from fear, but from the growing tremor in his chest, as if his heart had forgotten itself and learned to beat again, not from pain, but from hope. He hadn't expected to find his brother alive, but Unanai was here, broken and torn, but alive. He felt the girl's hot hand lightly touch his elbow, softly, without words, as if asking him to, "Let's go." He nodded. They went to the back passage, along the path along the fence, and disappeared into the falling night. Tsenai had only one desire, to carry his brother as far away as possible. But the girl stopped him when they reached the old mill, a ramshackle place surrounded by bushes and dry acacia trees. She knew the place. Mormons had once lived here, but they were long gone. There was a shelter. We could wait there. They carried Unanai's body to a pile of straw. The girl untangled the bandages, and then Tsenai saw how badly his brother's hands were mutilated. His face, scarred and burned, was barely recognizable. But he was breathing, and that was all that mattered. She worked in silence, steaming herbs, applying compresses, chewing mistletoe root, and mixing it with clay. It wasn't just the healer's movements. It was more than that. It was as if in these touches, in these movements, there was a personal vow, not to let those who could still be saved die. Her eyes were as deep as the morning waters at the foot of the cliffs, calm but full of power. He didn't know who she was. She didn't mention a name. All she said was, "In other lands I was called Ranaway, but here I'm just Leah." He nodded. "I'm Tsenai. My father gave me my name when the sun rose and the wind changed direction." She wasn't surprised. She listened as if every word had a price. For the first time, he felt that he could speak. Not to prove, not to accuse, not to defend, but just to speak. And in the stillness of the windmill, amid the shadows and the breath of night, there was that wavering, inexplicable thread between them that is not born in words. It appears between hearts when both have experienced something that is not expressed in language. On the third day, my brother regained consciousness. He didn't speak. His tongue was swollen, his mouth cracked. But he recognized Tsenai. His eyes filled with tears, and he only managed to say, "I'm sorry. I didn't save." Tsenai leaned forward. "You don't have to. You are alive." Leah later revealed that the day she saw Unanai was an accident. He was dragged to a white settler camp. He was covered in blood. They said they found it by the river. She didn't believe it. He was beaten up as if he was being interrogated. The bearded man, whose name was Mr. Eldridge, said he was a wild man who shot a goose, but there were no geese, no arrows, only Unanai. She wanted to save him, just save it, not out of duty, but because I couldn't help it. She helped people no matter whose they were. And when he started shouting in their Navajo language, she knew he wasn't just a savage. He was someone's brother. She began to wait, and I waited for Tsenai. They lived in the mill for 6 days. There wasn't enough water. Tsenai walked several miles to the stream every morning. Leah gathered the bark to make a decoction, ground the leaves into powder, and made sure that there were no flies or snakes. My brother was recovering. My body was still weak, but my mind was coming back. And with each passing day, Tsenai saw Leah more and more as a creature who came not from the enemy's camp, but from other stories. He asked her where she was from. She said little, but enough. Her father was a druggist in Louisville. My mother died of cholera. After that, she left with the missionaries, but realized that she did not want to preach. I wanted to treat them. She talked about herbs, about water, about human pain, as if it was something alive. And when he heard her voice, his stomach clenched. It wasn't fear. It was a longing for something he didn't know, but always wanted to feel. One night, when the wind whispered through the rafters and the fire was barely smoldering, he saw her sitting against the wall with her eyes closed. Her dark hair was loose, and her hands were covered in ointments. He sat down next to her. They were silent for a long time. "Will you leave when he can walk?" "What is it?" she asked softly. He didn't know. He'd never asked himself that question, whether he will leave, whether it will return. He lived for revenge. And now I didn't know what he'd become. He reached out and touched her shoulder. She didn't pull away. She looked into his eyes. Everything was there. Pain, loneliness, doubt, trust. "I think I've forgotten how to be alive," he said. She put her hand to his cheek. "Then remember it here." And he bowed down. "Carefully. Don't be rude." As if every second could disappear. He kissed her, and it wasn't a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of lost time, pain, forgiveness, and something new that neither of them knew how to name. They didn't talk about it anymore. In the morning, Leah went back to gathering herbs, and Tsenai checked the western slope again, where the tracks might lead to them. But now there was a connection between them, not a promise, not love, but the beginning. And at this beginning, a storm was already brewing. The day began with the smell of bitter dust and wet earth. After a 3-day heat wave, it had rained sparsely in the area during the night, and the ground seemed to float as if it were breathing on its own. The wind brought smells from the east, iron, sweat, grease. Tsenai got up first. His body, accustomed to running and pain, no longer felt tired, but today, his back was cold. Something disturbing. He knew they couldn't hide for long. Leah woke up early too. Her face was tense. She watched as the bandages on Unanai's body. Unanai showed patches of pus. The fever rose again, and she knew they needed Yue root, which only grew near the rocks at Chinli Pass. It's a day's journey there, one day in either direction. She knew that if she didn't go, Unanai might not live to see the next sunset, but to leave was to leave them. "I have to go," she said without hesitation. "1. You won't find Yue. You don't know its smell, and it smells like wet wool. You'll be wrong." Tsenai stood in silence. He didn't want to let go, but he didn't argue. She looked at him, then touched his chest with her fingers. Not lovingly, but rather as a sign. How warriors touch each other before a fight. Then she turned and disappeared behind the wall of acacia trees. He stood at the door for a long time. My heart was beating differently. It didn't burn like it did in the days of hate. It pulled, not to kill, but to protect. He knew that now he had 2 wounded men. One is a brother. The second is the one whose soul has become closer to him than the voice of his ancestors. By evening, Unanai was delirious. He called out to his mother, spoke to someone in his forgotten childhood language. His memory carried him back. Tsenai sat next to him, changing bandages and giving him water. He didn't know how to be a healer, but I did what I could. Meanwhile, Leah was walking along a rocky trail, carefully avoiding the tracks of coyotes and rock rattlesnakes. Her dress was plastered to her body, sweat trickled down her back, and she carried a leather bag and a knife. She wasn't afraid. There is no use in fear. She knew that if she died, Tsenai's brother would die too. Her steps were quick, but not fussy, and when she finally saw the silvery leaves of Yue among the cracks of the rocks, the sun was setting. But there was a man waiting for her on the way back. He was sitting on a horse near the slope with a rifle in his hands. It was the same Eldridge who had given the order to abandon Unanai in the white camp. He wasn't smiling. He looked reserved. His mouth twisted into a sardonic grin. "You think I didn't know where you were?" "No," he said. "I knew as soon as you left the camp." She didn't answer. "Are you one of them now?" he spat. "Will you bear them children? Or just treat them while they kill?" He swung down from the saddle. Gradually, carefully, like a hunter approaching a wounded cat, Leah didn't move. She had a knife, but Eldridge is a man with a gun. She could have died here, at the foot of the cliff, but he didn't come for it. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it until it hurt. "You're a traitor. It was our man. We wanted to know where the camp was. And you're with him, the beast. You chose a side." She stabbed him, not in the heart, but in the shoulder, to break out. He screamed, but didn't fall, and then she ran. Not on a path, but through bushes, through boulders, through a ravine where sounds reverberate like the voices of spirits. He was shooting. A bullet whizzed past his ear. The second one hit a rock. Then he fell silent. Tsenai heard the shots many miles away. He ran out of hiding, his heart pounding like a buffalo trapped in a canyon. He grabbed the spear. He already knew that this wasn't a hunt. It was something else. He could feel it in his bones. They met at the roots of a dry poplar tree. She was covered in blood. Her face was scratched. Her hair was torn out. But she was holding a bag of roots. He ran over, caught her, and scooped her up in his arms. She wasn't unconscious, but her eyes were glassy. He carried her back, as one carries water, as one carries a fire that cannot be extinguished. When she woke up, it was too late. He was sitting next to me. She pressed her forehead against his. "I brought Yue," she whispered. "Can you make a decoction?" He nodded. He already knew. He learned. At night, Unanai drank the bitter liquid, exhaling heavily like an ox wounded in the neck. Then he was quiet. Sweat trickled down his temples. The fever subsided. And they were both sitting against the wall, Tsenai and Leah. Silently, but there were more words in the silence than in the songs. And in the morning, the wind changed direction. It no longer smelled like dust. It carried smoke with it. A troop was coming down from the mountains. The morning was dry. The air was as hard as old leather. Tsenai and Leah stood at the mouth of the cave, where the remains of a fire were smoking. Unanai was breathing calmly, deep in sleep. Everything seemed to be getting better. But the silence was deceptive. Smoke rose from the southern slopes, where rocks cascaded down to dry riverbeds. It was thin but firm. Such smoke does not come from a hunter's fire, only from a column, only from the army. Tsenai's entire body tensed. He knew that intelligence had found them. The party was coming from the south, from Fort Wingate. It was one of those campaigns that the elders talked about. Punitive, with strict orders. Take no prisoners, don't figure it out. He didn't say a word. He simply took Leah's hand, holding it tightly, as only those who are willing to die by her side do. Then he went inside and lifted Unanai onto his shoulder. There was no more time. They headed northwest, toward an old trail that had long since been abandoned. Only the old people remembered her. There, among the collapses, was the entrance to the canyon. Not on the map, not on the ears of the army. But they didn't go far. A few miles later, when the sun was straight and unforgiving, a column blocked the road. 15 horsemen, dusty, in blue uniforms, with rifles slung across their backs. Captain Garrett Holland, the man with the white temples, rode in front Holland off them. He wasn't the type to shoot first, but not one of those who doubt. He raised his hand. The entire column stopped. Garrett looked at them. Trio. One is wounded, one is white, wearing tribal clothing. And a warrior with a face covered in red ochre. You're surrounded, he said quietly. We're not shooting. While Tsenai stood motionless. Leah stepped forward, calling out the captain's name in a shaky voice. She knew him. He was in the camp 2 months ago. I hadn't fired yet. He is respected by both Navajo and army people. Captain Holland, she said, loud and clear. This man is not a warrior. He saved my brother. He saved me too. Garrett looked at her. His eyes were as gray as ice in spring. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he jumped down from his horse. He came closer. Who are you? He asked. My name is Leah Barton. I'm a medic. I arrived at Fort Fauntleroy accompanied by the family of Priest Blaine. I left voluntarily. Garrett stared into her eyes for a long moment. Then he looked at Tsenai. You're the one they're looking for, he said. You were at the fort. Your brother ran away. You killed a white hunter near the camp. Tsenai didn't answer, but he didn't look away. Holland sighed. We have orders. Intercept the fugitives. Return the woman. Destroy the threat. You're a threat. Leah stepped between them. He saved my brother. He didn't kill anyone for no reason. We weren't a threat. We were hiding. They fired first. The silence grew heavy. One of the soldiers behind coughed. Someone shifted the rifle. The captain raised his hand. Are you putting yourself under my protection? He asked Leah. Yes, she said. But only if he and his brother are safe. That's impossible. Tsenai stepped forward. Then kill me here, he said, or let me pass. Holland stared at him for a long moment. His face was set in stone, but something in him flinched. He turned around. There's a trail through Sand Needle Gorge. Beyond that, Hopi land. We have no orders to pursue them beyond the borders of the mandate. You have 2 hours. After that, I can't guarantee anything. He climbed back on his horse. The soldiers did not immediately realize that a retreat had been ordered, but they started moving, one by one. Without words, Leah walked over to Tsenai. He didn't look at her. I just squeezed my shoulder. You risked yourself, he said quietly. I couldn't have done it any other way. They walked for the rest of the day, until the sky turned coppery. The Sand Needle Gorge was narrow, with steep walls and an echo that echoed every rustle. They found shelter under the eaves of a cliff. We stopped there. There was no sleep that night, just breathing. Leah was sitting by the fire. Tsenai is nearby. He put his hand on hers. Not as a lover, but as one who has taken a soul. "I didn't know you could do that," he said. "How?" "Trust." She didn't answer, just snuggled closer. Their kiss was quiet. No extra stuff, without the passion you read in books. It was the kiss of those who had been afraid for too long. And in the morning, footsteps. Unexpected ones. Fast ones, not soldiers. Tribe. Hopi people. With bows, with stone amulets around their necks. They weren't smiling. And a woman with them, with a tattoo on his cheek, with eyes like a nighthawk's. The one who knew the rituals, the one who heard the wind. She looked at Tsenai. "You brought a storm with you," she said. "You're in love. But that means you're not a warrior anymore." The sky above the canyon was like hot iron. The sun was sinking behind the mountains, turning the clouds blood orange. The wind tore at his clothes and hair, carrying the smell of bonfires, spilled blood, and the freshness of wormwood. The whole story was reflected in these winds, an age of struggle, pain, and hope. Tsenai stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the curve of the river where the water had washed away their tracks. Next to her is Leah. Her face was tired but calm. They knew that this evening would be the last time things would change. Behind them, a dark line of men gathered. Hopi warriors armed with bows and axes, and Navajo warriors gathered together to decide their fate. Captain Garrett Holland and an army squad were approaching from the other side, circling the canyon. Both sides knew there was no room for mercy. Tsenai remembered his brother. How Unanai pointed to the horizon where white settlers appeared, how he shrank from fear and anger. He remembered the first shot that had broken the silence, and the pain that had made his heart clench. "We can't run any longer," he told Leah. "I have to make a choice." She looked up into his eyes, which were as deep as the night sky. "What will you choose?" He didn't answer right away. His hand slid to the turquoise amulet his father had given him. This stone held the spirit of the ancestors, but now it felt heavy. "I'll choose life," he finally said. "But not for my own sake, for the sake of those who will be left behind." The Navajo and Hopi warriors gathered in a circle, their voices rising in a song that was ancient and bitter, appealing to the spirits of earth and sky. Leah walked beside Tsenai, holding his hand as tightly as ever. Captain Holland raised his hand and signaled that the shots were meant to frighten, not kill. It was a game of nerves. Suddenly, a woman stepped out of the crowd, the one with the tattoo on her cheek that Tsenai had met Tsenai in the ravine. Her name was Nayali. She was a priestess, a middleman between worlds whose word meant more than bullets. "Stop it," Nayali said, Nayali loudly. "Let the wind decide. Let him dance with us, not with the blood." She turned to the captain. "You came here with a sword, but not a heart. War will destroy us all. There is another way." Garrett looked at her. He had seen so much death that Nayali's words Nayalikut like a knife blade. But something inside him responded. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "A truce, exchange, respect for the land and for each other." Tsenai stepped forward. "We are not enemies," he said. "We've lost too much, my brothers and sisters, my blood and soul. But I don't want to shed any more blood." Garrett nodded slowly. He raised his hand and signaled for the soldiers to lower their weapons. The wind played with the ashes of the campfires. "The dance with the wind has begun." Leah snuggled up to Tsenai. Their lips met in a long kiss, a kiss that was filled with pain, hope, and promise. It was a dance without words, a dance that began when death receded and life broke through the pain. But deep in the canyon, hidden in the shadows, stood Eldridge. His eyes were cold. As he watched, darkness grew in his heart. Dancing with the wind isn't over for everyone. The story ended only for those who chose peace, and the wind continued to sing its songs. Songs of love and struggle, of life and death, of hope and oblivion.